Hey everybody, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution Scriptures. We've had a short break and we're going to continue on in 2 Samuel. We're pretty much at the beginning of 2 Samuel and let me see. Let's go there. We're going into sorrow today. Really interesting what's happening with these scriptures because two more articles have come up this week and they coincide with the next two chapters, one today and I'll do another one tomorrow, of what's happening in 2 Samuel. And of course, totally relevant, totally amazing understanding that Yahushua given Christopher through these articles that are going to come up, and they're going to relate exactly, intertwine with them. So let's go into it. 2 Samuel chapter 2, I think we're doing today, and it's going to tie up in this theme of sorrow. But let's go back to King David, because it's really interesting with David where he's just starting to become royal. He's just become the king of Judah anyway. Let's read. David is now king of Judah and living in Hebron. Why would one single tribe, Judah, choose to have a king instead of simply having a tribal prince or leader? Why would one tribe choose to do that? Clan leaders would end up having less authority under a king. And while having a king makes sense if you want to put one man in charge of a whole number of tribes, that's not the case here. The clan leaders of Judah in the south figured that there would definitely be a new king over the northern tribe that was headed by King Saul before his death, and that since Judah didn't want their northern king over them, it was better to anoint their own king while there was a power vacuum up north, hoping that their man David might even become king over all of the 12 tribes and give them, Judah, a position of superiority over the other tribes. So that's why, why would you normally anoint a king over one single tribe? All the tribal leaders wouldn't have any power under a king. They would have wanted to keep it the way it was. But because they knew something was going on up north, Saul's been killed, so there's another king coming into play there. We don't want whatever they're happening up there, we don't want that. We're down here. We're Judah. We're a royal tribe, according to Jacob's deathbed. So they've anointed David as their king over Judah. See here in the map, Judah. There. And most of the events in this chapter that we're talking about today are all happening in Hebron. If you recall, Hebron was where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were all buried. That's where Abraham bought that piece of land off the guy to bury his wife in. So this was a really special place, Hebron, in patriarchal history. So let's go on. We're going to talk about a lot of history, a lot of politics, power plays going on right now. 2 Samuel chapter 2. After David had mourned the loss of both Jonathan and Saul, remember that happened last chapter? Tied that up with a nice little bow. Jonathan and Saul, there was a big battle, they were all killed. So David has just been mourning the loss of both Jonathan and Saul. Then he asked Yahuah, should I go back to one of the cities of Judah now? Because he was living at Ziklag in Philistia. Yes, it's time to go back. Where should I go? Hebron. Okay, cool. So David went to Hebron with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel. He also brought along all his men and their households, and they settled in and around the royal city of Hebron, where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were buried. That's why it was royal to them. It had a lot of spiritual significance to them. It's where Yahuah had met with their ancestors. Then the people of Judah came and anointed David king over them. They told David how the people of Jabesh Gilead had displayed such great courage by braving the presence of the Philistines to retrieve the decapitated body of Saul from the walls of Beit-Shean, and had given him a proper burial with dignity at their city on the east side of the Jordan River. So David sent messengers to them saying, "May Yahuah bless you for your loyalty to your king Saul by giving him a proper burial. May the eternal Yahuah always love and be loyal to you. I will also reward you for this noble act." We see here one of the qualities of David that made him so dear to Yahuah, because it was usual and customary for a new king to purge his predecessor's accomplishments, his family, and those who sympathized with the former king. Get rid of all of it. Get rid of the former administration. But instead, David reached out to the people of Jabesh Gilead and even sought to reward them for their loyalty to King Saul. David continued, "Now be strong and mighty," he said, "for Saul your king is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me as their new king." He tells them to be strong and mighty. What would strength and might have to do with Jabesh accepting David's offer of repayment and kindness? Essentially, remember, we're going back in time here, like watching a soap opera or Netflix and chill. We want to know the culture. We want to get into this, go back in time and understand what all the little idioms and phrase of speech mean. So essentially, it's because this repayment and kindness that David's talking about is all wrapped up in Jabesh establishing a covenant with David. He wants them loyal to him. David is asking Jabesh to break away from the northern tribal coalition, all around about 10 northern tribes. He wants them to break away from them and instead become part of David's southern kingdom. David is asking that this group of men with such close ties to the tribe of Benjamin, Saul's tribe, transfer their loyalty to the tribe of Judah, which will take courage because their northern tribal coalition partners will not only be supremely unhappy with them for doing that, but might even try to punish them for what they would likely see as no less than treason. Jabesh's response to David's offer is not given, but considering what had happened to them several decades earlier, when mostly the northern tribes of Israel punished them severely, nearly into extinction, for the Levites' concubine incident in Judges. That was this same tribe, same city of Jabesh. So considering that happened, their reluctancy to jump at David's offer can be understood. So we don't know what their decision was at this point. But David's not stupid. He wants their loyalty because he's only the king of one tribe, essentially, Judah. And Simeon's pretty much included in Judah, but so David is the king of Judah. But it wasn't so simple because Abner, remember Abner, who had commanded Saul's armies, Saul's right-hand man? Abner had taken Saul's son Ishbosheth and brought him to Mahanaim, and there Abner named Ishbosheth king over Gilead and over the Ashurites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Essentially, all the northern tribes. Essentially, that's who we're talking about, give or take a bit. Basically, all the northern tribes are now the kingdom of Ishbosheth, Saul's son. So Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to rule Israel, and he was king for 2 years. But the people of Judah followed David, and he was king over them in Hebron for 7.5 years. Without a doubt, Abner, Saul's commander, was the real power in Saul's kingdom at the moment, simply because he had the might of the army behind him. Since Ishbosheth is a legitimate heir to the throne, Abner has little choice but to appoint him as the new king. Abner decided to relocate Ishbosheth out of the northern region of Canaan and across the Jordan River to a place called Mahanaim. And it was there that he formally appointed Ishbosheth as his father's successor. Interesting. It would be easier for Ishbosheth to set up his new government there in the east. This is over on the eastern side of the river where there were 2.5 tribes, the Transjordan as they call it. It would be easier for Ishbosheth to set up his new government there in the east because the Philistines now had too much control over the land that constituted Saul's old kingdom. Why would Abner want to crown Ishbosheth at all, since apparently he knew that Yahuah intended David to be the king? It is clear that Abner had more respect for Yahuah and his commands and decrees than his former boss did, that's King Saul. He was well aware that David was Yahuah's choice to be king over all of the Israelite tribes. He knew this, but he's in a power play as well, as we'll see. So, Abner, the son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, they travelled from Mahanaim to Gibeon. So they went across the river over to Gibeon. And Joab, who's David's general, whose mother was David's sister Zeruiah, and also David's servants were travelling there too. And they ran into each other at the pool of Gibeon. So we've got two sides here. We've got Abner and Ishbosheth, their men, travelling to Gibeon. And we've got Joab, who's David's right-hand man, his general, travelling to Gibeon, the pool of Gibeon as well. So we've got two constitutions, two sides going on here. Abner's forces were by one side of the pool and Joab's forces by the other. What to do? Start a full-blown war with no battle plan? So, the more battle-experienced Abner said to Joab, "Why don't we send our young soldiers out to have a contest before us?" "Alrighty then, send them forward," Joab agreed. So 12 men came forward to represent the people of Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 men came forward to represent David and his people, Judah. 12 from Judah, 12 from the northern tribes. Yeah? They're just going to have a contest. To the death, mind you. They all caught their opponents by the head and thrust their swords into their opponents' sides, so they all fell down together. All 12 from both sides killed each other. And that is why this place was called the Field of Adversaries, ℧𝐻𝑎𝑧𝑎𝑟𝑖m in Gibeon. The battle that followed this contest was brutal that day, and Abner and the men of Yisrael were defeated by the servants of David. All three of Zeruiah's sons were fighting for David. So these are three brothers. There's Joab, he was David's commander, his brother Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel was a swift runner, as fast as a gazelle, and he chased after Abner intently. Then Abner looked behind him. "Is that you, Asahel?" He laughed. "You better believe it, mate." "Would you get out of here and stop pursuing me, you pest? Go and attack one of the soldiers of your own rank and pinch his stuff instead." But Asahel would not stop coming after him. "Oi, I warned you, if you don't stop pursuing me, I'll have no choice but to kill you. And how would that go down with your brother Joab if I did that?" But Asahel, a younger, cockier man, had set his sights on his big prize, Abner, not giving it a second thought that this grizzled old warrior had lived so long, fighting alongside Saul, because he was a fierce and cunning fighter who didn't know how to lose. So in youthful exuberance, Asahel responded by turning on the jets, breathing down Abner's neck, who then used a military trick that only the most experienced would dare to try. Abner had sharpened the wooden handle end of his spear, and as Asahel was ready to strike, certain that he was about to end the life of this old man of legendary status, Abner unexpectedly and abruptly slammed on the brakes and, without even turning, thrust the sharpened handle of his spear backward, and Asahel literally ran into it and impaled himself upon it. Abner struck Asahel in his abdomen, and it passed all the way through him. So there he fell, and there he died. And because Asahel had raced out ahead of everyone, it would take some time before the rest of the group caught up. And when they did, they all froze in their tracks when they came upon Asahel's lifeless body. And they just stood there staring in amazement. But the sight of their dead brother gave Asahel's brothers Joab and Abishai their second wind of adrenaline, and they pursued Abner with their forces, blood in their eyes and murder in their hearts. And as the sun was setting, they reached the hill of Ammah, that is in front of Giah, on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. And there the people of Benjamin banded together to protect Abner, and they made their stand on top of a hill. So they're approaching. They're on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon, but they're approaching Benjamin, And Saul and Abner that's where they lived. So they're protecting them. Hey, Joab, this is ridiculous. Are we going to keep killing forever? Don't you see that this will all come to a bitter end? How long until you order your forces to stop pursuing their brothers? Abner called out. Abner's words were about trying to convince Abishai and Joab to put aside what was now a personal vendetta against him. This was no longer about military victory. After all, there wasn't any real need for a battle to have started at all, since David and Ishbosheth, kings of the north and south, they weren't even at war. No, there was a conflict going on because David had been announced and prophesied as the king over all Israel, and a lot of tribes weren't having it yet. So there was conflict. And then Abner goes and anoints Ishbosheth, Saul's son, as the king of all the northern tribes. David's only the king of Judah. So there's conflict there. There's no official war, no official national state of war. So there didn't even need to be this bloodshed this day. See how insane it is? Just soldiers being idiots. So, and now it's turned into a personal vendetta because you killed my brother. Now I'm going to kill you. So Abner's trying to say to him, let's quit this right now. It's insane. So he says that this isn't going to end well. Let's quit this. Joab says, as Elohim lives, if you hadn't just said that, my forces would have pursued their Israelite brothers all night until morning. What was a cold war of sorts between those loyal to David and those loyal to Ishbosheth before this incident had now turned into a family blood feud. So what was this kind of a cold war was now a family blood feud. Abner knew this. Abner knew that this is what would happen. Abner knew that this is what would happen. And this is why he told Asahel to stop chasing him down and go after someone else. Abner knew that he'd have to kill Asahel otherwise, and the result would be an ongoing series of revenge killings between the two families. In any case, Joab knew that there had been enough bloodshed for one day, and that Abner and his men were in strong defensive positions, so he quit coming after him. So Joab blew the ram's horn to call off the attack against the men of Israel, and all pursuit and battle stopped. Abner and his men went on, travelled all night across the desert plains of the Arabah. Then they crossed the Jordan River, and by travelling all morning they reached Mahanaim. Joab and his forces, meanwhile, came back together after pursuing Abner. They discovered that in addition to Asahel, only 19 of David's men were missing. But David's men had killed 360 of the men of Benjamin and the others who served Abner, since they were experienced soldiers who'd fought with David himself for many years. So David's forces seem to be more mighty, don't they? They've killed 360 men, whereas David's only missing 19 men from his forces. They brought Asahel's body back and buried him in Bethlehem in his ancestral tomb. Then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived home in Hebron at dawn. And Joab burned with desire for revenge. The truce arranged at Armour Hill between he and Abner applied only to kingdom business. This truce that just happened up here, Abner says, that's enough. Enough's enough. You're outnumbered. We've just killed more men than... He just says, you're outnumbered. We've got all the tribe of Benjamin around us. You're outnumbered. So Joab called it off. But this truce between he and Abner only applied to kingdom business. But the matter over Asahel's death was personal and between he and Abner alone. This was, after all, the Middle East, where all blood feuds end badly and in great sorrow. And we're going to see the consequence for this happen in our next chapter. But I want to talk about sorrow here because this amazing article by Christopher came up. Yahushua gave this to him about 3 days ago. And it relates a lot to what's going on here. The politics and the power play and people looking up and looking down at each other and all this stuff. Let's have a look at the word sorrow, yeah? In the Hebrew, sorrow means to pant, hence to exert oneself, usually in vain, to come to naught. Strictly nothingness. Sorrow means nothingness. Also trouble, vanity, wickedness, specifically an idol. Sorrow is an idol. Affliction, evil, false, idol, iniquity, mischief. Not many positive words here, are there? It's all negative. It's all evil. Mischief, mourners, naught, sorrow, unjust, unrighteous, vain, vanity, wicked, bad, evil, natural or moral, adversity, affliction, calamity, displeasure, distress, grievous, harm, heavy, hurtful, ill-favoured, misery, naught, naughty, noisome, not please, sadly, sore, sorrow, trouble, vex, wickedly or wickedness one, worst, wretchedness, wrong, depression of spirits, concretely, a grief, heaviness or sorrow. Gives a bit of understanding of what sorrow means in the inspired Hebrew language. Interesting that sorrow can be idolatry. You can be just focusing completely on your own self and sorrow and what you've had to go through and everything. These words and many others show the result of allowing ourselves to open the doors of sorrow. The result of allowing ourselves, giving yourselves the right to open the doors of sorrow. You open the doors, the floodgates, watch out. So in the scriptural understanding, Hebrews 6 says, therefore, having left the word of the beginning of Mashiach. What does that mean? Therefore, having left the word of the beginning of Mashiach, which most other translations say first principles, because that actually makes sense. Therefore, having left the first principles, let us go on to perfection. Therefore, having left the first principles, let's go on to perfection. Doesn't mean we abandon the first principles. No, we've learnt them. We're doing them. Let's go on to maturity. Don't just hang around. Let's go on to maturity. Not laying again the foundation. Once you've got a foundation, it's a foundation. You don't have to lay a foundation again, do you? Very rarely. Unless the whole house, foundation, earthquake, something like that. No, you never lay the foundation again. You're just perfecting the actual structure. Do not lay again the foundation of repentance from dead works. Don't lay again belief towards Yahuah, of the teaching of immersion. You don't have to lay that foundation again, of laying on of hands, of resurrection of the dead, and of everlasting judgment. We got it. We understand. If someone needs to know it, you tell them. You go on. Yeah? This we shall do if Yahuah indeed permits. You can go on if Yahuah permits. Yeah? We have spoken before of the first principles, which are written in the above text. And we believe that the Messianics, the Gnatrim, and the Jewish believers have made a religion of the first principles, and how. These, along with the shadow feasts of Israel, are the ultimate climax of this so-called renewed, man-made religion, which then repeats the yearly feast in a cycle. This is a whole man-made religion. Yeah? The Jewish feasts, the Messianics, the Gnatrim have taken them all on. It's now a yearly calendar event system, just like the world, just like the Mazzaroth Babylonian system. It's just all mixed up with scripture now. Throw a few Hebrewisms in there, and we've got this whole new man-made religion, which repeats the yearly feasts in a cycle. And it's all wrapped in the first principles. Let's keep people in the first principles. Let's keep discussing it. Let's keep teaching it. Let's find out and work out different ways to teach it, so then we can put out different kind of books, keeping people walking around in the same filthy sheep pen, no fresh grass, nothing. They're all just walking around in their own feces and swill. That's the first principles. That's the state of the Messianic Nazarene movement, and it's disgusting. And what does Paul say? You've laid that foundation. Move on. Move on to maturity. Go on to maturity. But this is the block. This is the block in the doorway of entering the kingdom, the reign of Yahushua, who said, "Woe to you hypocrites! You stand in the doorway of the reign. You won't enter in yourselves, and neither will you suffer those trying to enter." Yahushua said that. Hypocrites standing in the doorway, trying to teach people the first principles over and over and over again. Doing the feasts in shadow form traditions never reveals Yahushua as Messiah. Have you got that? Doing the feasts in shadow form, just like the Jews do. Just like the Christians do, really. Christians and Jews, that's what Messianics and Nazarene have now done. Just mixed all of that together into their own mixture swill. Some believe in Yahushua, some don't believe in Yahushua. Some do the feast, some just acknowledge the Exodus, Passover. Some do this, some do that. Some wave around their little zeets and blow shofars and build sukkahs and fast and all these shadow things that they have a nice little religious experience. Not putting Yahushua first though. I'm sorry if this offends you. We're just going to keep saying it. We're not going anywhere. We're just going to keep saying it, because half the bride is not foolish, stupid. Stupid. Half the bride is stupid. If you believe this insanity, you are stupid. And we are here to tell you, stupid. All right? Many believers are trapped. If you're doing this on purpose and you don't want to leave it, and Yahushua taps you on the shoulder and goes, "There's a better way to do it," and you say, "No thanks, I'm going on with my religious tradition," then you're stupid. However, many believers today are trapped. They know something's wrong, but they're trapped in the deadness of man-made religion. They're trapped, believing they're on the true path. They're genuine. They believe they're on the true path. Been there many times. But they know something is wrong. When you get that inkling that something is wrong, don't ignore it. Many believers today are trapped in the deadness of man-made religion, believing they're on the true path, but they know something is wrong, which brings them into a sorrow, which of course is the enemy's full intention, because sin creates misery. Sorrow is sin. Why would the author of the BYNV omit the words first principles? Why? From his translation. And write in its place, therefore, having left the word of the beginning of Mashiach instead. What on earth does that mean? The word of the beginning. Is that the beginning creation? Is that the beginning of... what does that mean? How is anybody going to know or understand that this means the first principles? They won't. Keep them in it. Keep them in it, I say. Keep them in it so I can minister to them. We are told in verse 3 that after we pass the first principles, we have to be permitted. permitted by Yahuah to go on to full service. This fake religion of shadow teaching is blocking many from entering the reign and the kingdom, and sending them into mental anguish and sorrow. Remember that sorrow is an idol and will lead you into nothingness. How many people want to talk about their sorrow, their experience? They're still mourning who they might have been, who they think they still are in their ego. It's very, very sad, brothers and sisters. Sorrow is an idol. And how many people are worshipping this idolatry of the self? Didn't you give up your life when you went in the water? Didn't you surrender everything that you were, such as it was, the filthy rags that it was anyway? Because when we look back and we think, oh, wasn't this wonderful and wasn't that wonderful, looking back with rose-colored glasses, it's all rubbish. It's not accurate. Because if it was so wonderful, why did you come to Yahushua in the first place? Was it just an intellectual decision because mummy and daddy did it? No, we come to Yahushua broken, devastated. We're lost. We're sick. He drags us out of the gutter, puts his spirit in us. We're dead. He brings us back to life, and we are his love slaves. We are his servants, willing to go anywhere, do anything, be anything, say anything for him. Otherwise, do you want the alternative? The alternative is death. Death, that deathly feeling. He promises never to leave us or abandon us or forsake us, but that feeling of death inside us is him letting you know he's not pleased with you. You going on in your regrets and your sorrow. Oh, this happened to me, that happened to me. Yeah, well, most of it is a consequence for your own stupidity and own sinful choices throughout your life. Very rare, very few of us can actually say we've been genuinely persecuted for Yahushua. Generally, most of the pressure comes because we've applied the word stupidly, gone out there with it all over us and having the right to speak it in people's faces and annoy them and pester them. And then we cry persecution if we get any kind of hatred back. Of course you do. Stupid. You're stupid if you behave like that. And the behavior revolution is here to tell you, if you take the word and you behave it correctly, you don't have any sorrow. The 3 rules keep you sane. Cleans you out of the things Yahushua doesn't want you. All the opinions and things. Mutterings and pesterings and judgments of other people. It cleans you out. Because you put it to yourself, of course. So, we've got another amazing study coming on. I'll do it tomorrow, probably. And it's all about, it's flowing on from this exactly. We're not only are we going to see part 2 of what happens with this family blood feud that's just started because of this stupid feud that's going on with, contest. Let's have a contest. Let's see whose men can kill each other. We're not even in a state of war, but let's just see who we can kill. It's stupid. And now there's a blood feud fuming in Joab's heart. And we're also going to see how this word about the first principles flows into being righteous or unrighteous. So stay tuned, guys. There'll be another video before the weekend. Love you guys. Stay strong. We ain't going anywhere. These first principles have to shut up. Shut up about the first principles. Go on to maturity. Go on. Go on.